This is an NBC News special report. Here's Lester Holt.
Good day, everyone. We're coming on the air to bring you an extraordinary moment. A meeting here in New York underway between President Trump and the president of Ukraine. The same two men whose phone conversation last July has now triggered a congressional impeachment inquiry. Let's take you to that meeting.
He's very, very strongly looking into all sorts of corruption and some of the problems they've had over the years. I think it's one of the primary reasons he got elected. His reputation absolutely sterling. And it's an honor to be with you. And we spoke a couple of times, as you probably remember. And they'd like to hear every single word, and we give them every single word. And then they'll say, well, what about today? I think the press would like to stay in the meeting, but we have lots of witnesses if you'd like to have it. But the country of, our country is doing phenomenally well. We have the best economy we've ever had. We have the best employment numbers that we've ever had. We have now almost 160 million people working, which is more than we've ever had. So we're doing very well in every respect. And I have a feeling that your country is going to do fantastically well. And whatever we can do.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Please.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to me to be here. And it's better to be on TV than by phone.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Mr. President, thank you very much. And I'm not the first time, truly say, in New York.
Right.
But I know that you've never been in Ukraine.
That's right.
And your predecessor also, how to say it in English, didn't find time. I mean that.
Right.
So, can you give me a word that you will come to our great country?
Well, I'm going to try. And I know a lot of people, I will say this, I know a lot of people from Ukraine. They're great people. And I owned something called the Miss Universe pageants years ago, and I sold it to IMG. And when I ran for president, I thought maybe it wouldn't be the greatest thing to own the Miss Universe and Miss USA pageants, but it's a great thing. And we had a winner from Ukraine. And we've really we got to know the country very well in a lot of different ways. But it's a country, I think, with tremendous potential.
Yes, I know it, because I'm from that country.
Right.
And I want to thank you for invitation to Washington.
Right.
You invited me. But I think, I'm sorry, but I think you forgot to tell me the date. But I think in the nearest future.
They'll tell you the date.
Oh, yes, they know before us. And I want to thank you, especially, Mr. President, to USA, to your government. Like I said, that I know many people, many faces. It's like the second family after my Ukrainian family. We know each other. Thank you for your support, especially now when we have two wars in Ukraine. The first one is with corruption, but we'll fight. No, we'll be winner in this fight, I'm sure. And my priority is to stop the war on Donbass and to get back our territories, Crimea, Donbass, Lugansk. Thank you for your support in this case. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. If you remember, you lost Crimea during a different administration, not during the Trump administration.
Yeah, so you have chance to help us.
That's right, I did. But that was during the Obama administration that you lost Crimea. And I didn't think it was something that you should have, but that was done a long time ago, and I think it was handled poorly. But it's just one of those things. One of the elements that we discussed is the United States helps Ukraine, but I think that other countries should help Ukraine much more than they're doing. Germany, France, the European Union nations, they really should help you a lot more. And I think maybe together we'll work on that. They have to feel a little bit guilty about it because they don't do what they should be doing. You're very important to the European Union. You're very important, strategically very important. And I think they should spend a lot more in helping Ukraine. And they know that also. And they actually tell me that, but they don't seem to produce. So I'm sure you'll talk to them, and I'll certainly be talking to them.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Now I want to tell you that we now load the new country. And I'm sorry, but we don't need help. We need support, real support. And we thanks everybody, thank all of the European countries which help us, but we also want to have more, but I understand, so only together, America and EU, only together we can stop the war, and you know, we are ready. We just want to tell that we are, remember that we are the biggest country in Europe, but we want to be the richest one. It's true, it's in my heart.
Well, you know, you have great people in Ukraine, and you have very talented people in terms of manufacturing, in terms of some of the things they do. And we're doing trading already, but we should be doing a lot more trading with Ukraine. But you have very talented people. They make great things at the top of the line, really. So that's very important. And the other thing is, I've heard you actually have, over the last fairly short period of time, you've really made some progress with Russia. I hear a lot of progress has been made, and just keep it going. It'd be nice to end that whole disaster.
First of all, I want to tell you, before the relations with Russia, I will prolong in 1 minute. I mean that you have to know, and I want Walt to know that now we have the new team, the new parliament, the new government.
Right.
So now we voted about 74 laws, new laws, which help for our new reforms, land reform, big privatization, the law about concessions, we reload the general prosecurity, and we launched the service secretary. Is it right, service secretary?
Yes, anti-corruption court as well.
An anti-corruption court. As we came, we launched the anti-corruption court. It began to work on the 5th of September. Right. It was, you know, it was after 5 days we had the new government. So we are ready. We want to show that we just come, and if somebody, if you want to help us, so just let's do business cases.
Right.
We have many investment cases. We're ready.
And stop corruption in Ukraine, because that will really make you great. That will make you great personally, and it'll also be so tremendous for your nation in terms of what you want to do and where you want to take it. Thank you very much. It's a great honor.
Thank you very much, Mr.
President Zelensky, have you felt any pressure from President Trump to investigate Joe Biden and Hunter Biden?
I think you read everything. So I think you read text. I'm sorry, but I don't want to be involved to democratic, open elections of USA. No, you heard that we had, I think, good phone call. It was normal. We spoke about many things, and so I think, and you read it, that nobody pushed me. Yes.
In other words, no pressure.
President Trump,
because you know what? There was no pressure. And you know there was, and by the way, you know there was no pressure. All you have to do is see it, what went on the call. But you know that. But you could ask the question, and I appreciate the answer. Go ahead.
Mr. President, would you like President Zelensky to do more on Joe Biden and investigate?
No, I want him to do whatever he can. This was not his fault. He wasn't there. He's just been here recently. But whatever he can do in terms of corruption, because the corruption's massive. Now, when Biden's son walks away with millions of dollars from Ukraine and he knows nothing, and they're paying him millions of dollars, that's corruption. When Biden's son walks out of China with $1.5 billion in a fund, and the biggest funds in the world can't get money out of China, and he's there for one quick meeting and he flies in on Air Force Two, I think that's a horrible thing. I think it's a horrible thing. But I'm going far beyond that. I know the president, and I've read a lot about Ukraine. I've read a lot about a lot of countries. He wants to stop corruption. He was elected, I think, #1 on the basis of stopping corruption, which unfortunately has plagued Ukraine. And if he could do that, he's doing really the whole world a big favor. I know, and I think he's going to be successful.
Mr. President, on Rudy Giuliani, why do you think it's appropriate for your personal attorney to get involved in government business?
Well, you'd have to ask Rudy. I will tell you this, that Rudy's looking to also find out where the phony witch hunt started, how it started. You had a Russian witch hunt that turned out to be 2.5 years of phony nonsense. And Rudy Giuliani's a great lawyer. He was a great mayor. He's highly respected. I've watched the passion that he's had on television over the last few days. I think it's incredible the way he's done. What he's out is he wants to find out, where did this Russian witch hunt that you people really helped perpetrate, where did it start? How come it started? It was all nonsense. It was a hoax. It was a total hoax. It was a media hoax and a Democrat hoax. Where did it start? And Rudy's got every right to go and find out where that started. And other people are looking at that too. Where did it start? The enablers. Where did it all come from? It was out of thin air. And I think he's got a very strong right to do it. He's a good lawyer. He knows exactly what he's doing, and it's very important.
Mr. President, do you believe that the emails from Hillary Clinton, do you believe that they're in Ukraine? Do you think this whole thing...
I think they could be. You mean the 30,000 that she deleted?
Yes.
Yeah, I think they could very well. Boy, that was a nice question. I like that question. Because, frankly, I think that one of the great crimes committed is Hillary Clinton deleting 33,000 emails after Congress sends her a subpoena. Think of that. You can't even do that in a civil case. You can't get rid of evidence like that. She deleted 33,000 emails after, not before, after receiving the subpoena from the U.S. Congress. I mean, I've never heard. Now, she's done far worse than that, although I don't know how much worse it can be. But there were many other things she did that were wrong. But that's so obvious. She gets a subpoena from the United States Congress, and she deletes them. And then she said, as I remember it, that, oh, well, they had to do with the wedding and yoga. She does a lot of yoga, right? So they had 33,000 emails about the wedding of her daughter and yoga. I don't think so. How she got away with that one is just, but it's one of many. And it's corrupt government, because we have corruption also, Mr. President. We have a lot of corruption in our government. And when you see what happened with Hillary Clinton, when you see what happened with Comey and McCabe and all of these people, we have a lot of things going on here, too. Hopefully it's going to be found out very soon. But I think that a lot of progress has been made. A lot of progress has been made.
Will the military aid continue? Can you assure that it will continue in the future?
Well, we're working with Ukraine, and we want other countries to work with Ukraine. When I say work, I'm referring to money. They should put up more money. We put up a lot of money. I gave you anti-tank busters that, frankly, President Obama was sending you pillows and sheets. And I gave you anti-tank busters, and a lot of people didn't want to do that, but I did it. And I really hope that Russia, because I really believe that President Putin would like to do something, I really hope that you and President Putin get together and can solve your problem. That would be a tremendous achievement. And I know you're trying to do that.
President, did you ask the House Speaker
in the
to find
phone call, you said that you would look into Joe Biden. You would ask your prosecutor to look into the matter. Have you had that conversation?
Well, I think, no, I haven't, but I think that somebody, if you look at what he did, it's so bad. Where his son, he goes to China, he walks away with $1.5 billion. He goes to Ukraine and he walks away with $50,000 a month and a lot of money in addition to that. And the whole thing with the prosecutor in Ukraine. And he's on tape. This isn't like maybe he did it, maybe he didn't. He's on tape doing this. I saw this a while ago. I looked at it and I said, that's incredible. I've never seen anything like that. Now, either he's dumb or he thought he was in a room full of really good friends. Or maybe it's a combination of both in his case.
President Zelensky,
I heard your question. Thank you very much. Don't cry. I mean that we have independent country and independent general security. I can't push anyone, you know. That's it. That is the question. That is the answer. So I didn't call somebody or the new general security. I didn't ask him. I didn't push him. That's it.
Do you feel obligated to fulfill your promises to President Trump?
Sorry.
Ви почуваєтеся
У мене немає. Дякую, я вам відповім. Зобов'язаним що?
Obligated to do what?
А зобов'язаним про що? Я нікому нічого не винен. Ви всі розумієте. Україна...
Promises not Ви двічі принаймні казали, що ви будете розслідувати
Я сказав, що ми готові розслідувати. Україна незалежна країна і Генеральна прокуратура. Ви самі знаєте, у нас новий Руслан Рябошапка, дуже гарна, чесна людина. Ви знаєте, із західних, із освітою, із західним досвідом. І чи буде він розглядати? Він повинен розглядати будь-які справи. Які тут можуть бути обіцянки?
Він вже розглядає цю.
Я впевнений, що у нього є, ви мене вибачте, але у нас є своя країна, Україна. У нас набагато є важливіших, багато більше важливіших, дійсно дуже важливих питань. І ви знаєте, це справи, це дійсно справи, які дуже важливі для кожного українця. Це Іловайськ, це Майдан, це корупція, про яку зараз говорив президент.
The Ukrainian president speaking in Ukrainian, obviously more comfortable, especially on some of the pointed questions.
Concerning the investigation, actually, I want to underscore that Ukraine is an independent country. We have a new prosecutor general in Ukraine, a highly professional man with a Western education and history to investigate any case he considers and deems appropriate. Well, we have many more issues to care about and to tackle. We have Ilovaisk, we have Maidan, we have corruption cases, as President Trump rightly mentioned about that. So we know what to do and we know where to go, what to tackle.
President Trump, would there be a way to ask the Attorney General to be involved in this matter?
Go ahead.
President Zelensky.
Did you ask House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to find a way out of impeachment yesterday?
Not at all, no. Look, she's lost her way. She's been taken over by the radical left. She may be radical left herself, but she really has lost her way. I spoke to her about guns yesterday. She didn't even know what I was talking about. She's not interested in guns. I'll tell you what, Nancy Pelosi is not interested in guns and gun protection and gun safety. All she's thinking about is this. She's been taken over by the radical left, the whole Democrat Party. And you take a look at what's happening in the media today. The whole party is taken over by the left. And thank you very much. My poll numbers have gone up. But I don't want them to go up for this reason. When they look and when you see what's happening, people are really angry at Democrats. They're really angry at the Democrat Party. And things like, as an example, drug pricing, getting drugs down. Things like gun safety, infrastructure. The Democrats can't talk about that because they've been taken over by a radical group of people. And Nancy Pelosi, as far as I'm concerned, unfortunately, she's no longer the Speaker of the House. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much.
President Trump not biting on any further questions there in a rather spirited exchange, reacting to the formal impeachment process that began, at least the inquiry, with the president of Ukraine, President Zelensky. I'm with ANDREA Mitchell here with us. There is a lot that we've been watching unfold today. What we see from the president, clearly his line of defense is the power of repetition, which we've seen many times before, turning this onto the issue of Vice President Biden.
Turning it on to the issue of Biden, which has been fully investigated. And in fact, Joe Biden was appropriately, according to all reporting, pressuring the Ukrainians, as was the European Union, the IMF, and all of the Western democracies, to clean up their corruption. And part of the problem was this prosecutor who was part of the problem. He was part of the corruption. So that was the pressure to get rid of the prosecutor. This is referenced in the call where the president, inaccurately, apparently, is telling this Ukrainian leader in their first conversation, according to the transcript of the notes that were released today, that Biden inappropriately got rid of the prosecutor to somehow protect his son. But the president was going after this. Zelensky, who is so vulnerable, he's a new leader. He was elected to clean up corruption and try to win the war or fight off Russian aggression and regain Crimea. And so he needs these weapons. These are weapons that have been committed to by Congress, that have been committed to by decades by the United States government in exchange for Ukraine giving up their nuclear weapons decades ago. So he's trying to make nice, and he's saying, come to Ukraine. Your predecessor didn't come. He said he didn't have enough time.
He had flashes of humor. We should note he was a comedian.
He was an entertainer. He then said, you know, I'd like to come to Washington, but you haven't given me a date. He's trying to pin him down, trying to change the subject.
But the key word here is a key phrase. He says, nobody pushed me. The question really isn't whether he was pushed. The issue, as the Democrats seem to be pointing out, is the fact that there was an ask for help regarding investigating Biden. That in itself is a violation.
On its face of it, according to these notes, just the fact that the Ukrainian was talking about defensive weapons, getting weapons, the money had been frozen the week before by the President of the United States with no real explanation. And the President was saying right after that, yes, but I need a favor. And the favor was to go after Hillary Clinton, to go after the origins of the Mueller probe, which he believes is part of what many say is a conspiracy theory, and to go after Joe Biden and Joe Biden's son.
I want to go to Pete Williams right now. Pete, you've been watching all these events unfold today. What is the legal line here? If the president asks for help regarding an opponent, a potential opponent, is that a violation of the law?
The Justice Department says no. We learned today, Lester, that while the intelligence community was told by Justice that this didn't rise to the level of a whistleblower complaint that should automatically be reported to Congress, it should be referred to Justice for criminal prosecution, and that the Justice Department spent a couple of weeks looking into whether this did, in fact, amount to a solicitation of a foreign contribution. Now, the law speaks of something of value, and there have been cases in the past that the Federal Elections Commission has prosecuted or brought charges on or lawsuits over intangible things like polling data or campaign consultations, consultant help, things that aren't financial or direct monetary contribution. Nonetheless, Justice says this kind of a conversation between two leaders, a diplomatic conversation, they say, doesn't fit the definition of something of value, and for that reason they concluded it was not against the law. By the way, they also say that Attorney General Barr never knew about this call until the complaint came into the Justice Department, that President Trump has never talked to him about Ukraine, that he's never talked to Rudy Giuliani about this, Barr hasn't, and that Barr himself has never talked to the Ukrainians about it. Now, of course, whether that's an impeachable offense, that's not a legal matter. That's a political matter for Congress.
And I want to go to Chuck Todd right now, the moderator of Meet the Press. Chuck, you heard the president there using very familiar terms, a witch hunt. Is he essentially going to take the same game plan from Mueller and move it into this inquiry?
Well, I think he's going to try. I mean, you obviously do with what worked with you before, and I think he's going to try to do that. I just still can't get over how remarkable it was that the Ukrainian president there had to sit there, and I don't know if people caught the expression on his face when President Trump talked about the Crimea situation in a very dispassionate way, as if he could play no role in this. You saw the president of Ukraine going out of his way not to even use the word Russia until finally President Trump did. He says, you know, we're fighting two wars here, one on corruption, and then he didn't say the name of the country. I mean, it is remarkable how much the Ukrainian president there is trying desperately, frankly, to walk this tightrope of not offending President Trump, who could stop the aid, and at the same time not getting himself involved. He doesn't want to look like he's also defending him either. I mean, he's in this horrible situation. I'll say this. I think the president, frankly, I don't think we should ascribe a strategy here. I think they're grasping. At first, it was, if you think about it, over the last 3 days, we've seen different forms of how he's going to push back. At first, it was, we're not going to see a transcript of the call. Then impeachment happens. Okay, here it is. Well, there's not a violation of the law. There's not this. I don't think they have a strategy yet, Lester. I think this is the president flailing a bit still.
All right, thanks. I'm going to go to Ambassador Michael McFaul now out at Stanford. Ambassador, you have been involved in these types of conversations. We've been hearing the term transcript. It's really notes. Do you think we have a complete picture of what occurred in that conversation?
I don't know for sure, Lester. I used to do those transcripts when I used to work at the White House, and usually the note takers in the White House Situation Room transcribed them first, and then people like myself would correct them. I think it's pretty accurate, and what is accurate, I think it's a very clear quid pro quo. Mr. Zelensky, President-elect Zelensky, and now President Zelensky knows perfectly well the leverage that the United States has on him. He needs the United States. He needs those weapons. So when the President Trump says, hey, can you do me a favor? The quid pro quo, I think, was clear as day. And it is, I don't know if it's illegal, but it is wrong. And it is not the right way to conduct diplomacy.
But the money is never mentioned. At this point, the $400 million has been frozen, yet it somehow doesn't come up, at least in the written assessment we see.
Right, but President Zelensky knows the money's been frozen, right? You know, if you owe me $1 billion and then I say, hey, can you do me a favor, Lester? You know exactly what's going on there. And staffs prep their presidents, at least when I worked in the White House, so that they don't have to make those things as explicit.
All right, Ambassador, thank you. We want to look ahead now. We are going to hear from the president again fairly shortly. Let me go to Kristen Welker right now with more on that. Kristen?
Lester, the president is expected at about 4 p.m. here at the Intercontinental Hotel, where he will address the full press in the wake of this UN General Assembly. And he's going to have to answer a lot more questions like the ones he just got. You heard him there, defiant, digging in. I anticipate that's the President Trump that we're going to question. We know that some of his aides and allies have said, look, this impeachment inquiry could actually help the president politically, could embolden him, could energize his base. And while President Trump does see some political benefit, he understands it. At the same time, privately, this is a president who earlier this week was talking about winning the Nobel Peace Prize. He doesn't want to be associated with the I word. And I can tell you, I've been talking to some of his allies who say that this call is problematic. They are concerned about it. So where does this go from here? He's going to have to answer questions about that, as well as Rudy Giuliani's role. You heard him sort of dodge that question from my colleague Hallie Jackson. He's going to get a whole lot more of that when he addresses the press shortly.
All right,
Lester?
Kristen, and we will certainly see you then. This is another day of fast-moving developments in this story, including that news conference by President Trump, scheduled again to take place at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. That's just a short time from now. We will be back on the air to bring that to you live, and certainly any other developments before then, we'll come back to you. For now, I'm Lester Holt, NBC News in New York. Good day.